All right then. Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. This is a presentation of Then and Now. It's a local history lecture series co-sponsored by the Livermore Public Library and the Livermore Heritage Guild. And my name's Blanche Angelo. I'm a librarian at the Livermore Library, and my co-host this evening is Andrea Lloyd from the Livermore Heritage Guild. Before we get started, I just want to remind you of a few of the features of the program this evening. It's a Zoom webinar, and the audio and video are turned off for everyone who's attending. So we can't see or hear you, but we can sure see the comments in the chat and in the Q&A. So if you have any questions during the program about how Zoom works, you can type those in the Q&A, and Andrea and I will do our best to answer those during the program. If you have questions or comments about Richard's presentation, you can type those in, and he'll address all of that at the end of the talk. So we're really lucky to have Richard here tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, and thanks for coming. Here's Andrea.
Yes, thanks, Blanche. And as Blanche, I'm Andrea Lloyd from the Livermore Heritage Guild, and I'd like to welcome you to our first history talk of 2021. Hopefully, we will be able to do it in other formats as the year progresses, but for now, this is a great way for us to share the love of our city with you. Our speaker tonight is Richard Finn. Richard is our city historian, and he's a wealth of information on the history of Livermore. Tonight, Richard will take us on a tour of the historic downtown. So without further ado, I'm turning it over to Richard. Enjoy.
Thank you very much. Tonight, we're going to go downtown. Some of you joined us a while back where we went to visit some of the old houses on the south side. But this is more or less the same kind of walk that we give when we take folks. Started out, it was for third grade students, but we've taken adults on the same trip. So we always start at the library, and we talk about the library. We talk about Andrew Carnegie. Tonight, we're going to have to move really fast. This walk normally takes about 2 hours, but to try to get it to less than an hour, I'm going to skip a lot of the details. And then maybe later, you can join us for a walk. We're going to go to a few places tonight on our walk that we don't do on our regular walk because they're just a little bit too far out of the way. So what I'm going to do is show you pictures sometimes of the building as it looks now, sometimes as it looked in the past. And then I'm going to show you, if I've been able to find them, pictures of what the building looked like in the early days. Hopefully as far back to as when it was built. So here's the Carnegie Building, built in 1911 and was used as a library until 1966. It now is the home of the Livermore Heritage Guild Museum and the Livermore Art Association. The next picture shows us the building then. I think this was around 1910, and it was built with a matching grant of $10,000 from the Carnegie Foundation. And then the people in the city of, well, it wasn't a city, it was a tiny town of Livermore, then eventually came up with the $10,000 in 1910, and the building was built. And like I said, 1911, then it was open. Now look at the picture the way it is now, and you can see the fountain's not there. In fact, the steps from the first landing down to the fountain sidewalk is not there. And so the building was built on a flat area, and then dirt was put around the outside to have kind of the bank that we have now. And then, of course, the stairs. And of course, we have all kind of landscaping now that we didn't have in the early days. Okay, now we're going to start walking really fast. We're going to go down to the corner of K Street and 2nd. And this was a building that was built by the Roboli brothers for their winery. And for many years, a lot of you will remember it was Knox's Flowers. And then more recently, then it's Monica's restaurant. Now, the next picture is going to show you how it looked when it was built. And you can see very plainly up on top, it was built in 1910. But like many, many buildings in Livermore, in the 1920s and 1930s, the brick buildings, many of them, in fact, almost all of them, were covered with stucco. And that includes, of course, this building. It includes the old Firehouse, the Indian restaurant, and one of the biggest brick buildings in town, the Livermore High School. Okay, next door is a cottage that a lot of people call the Roboli Cottage. I think a more correct name might be the Harlan Wolfmeyer Roboli Cottage. As best I can figure out, Jacob Wright Harlan was the first one to live there in 1884. His wagon train that his uncle George Harlan brought over the Sierras in 1846 was the last wagon train that went over the Sierras, and just ahead of the Donners. And you know what happened to the Donners. The next resident of the house was the shoemaker named Mathis Wolfmeyer and his wife, Katharina. And then third residents then were two brothers, Peter and Charles Roboli, and their wives, and 9 children lived in that small house. And to start with, I understand there was no bathroom facilities and all. There was an outhouse behind. And then in 1917, they built a big brick house of yellow brick from the Livermore Brick Company. Okay, now we're going to cross the street and go down a little bit. And this is the Wells Fargo parking lot. And a little over 100 years ago, a lot of work was going on there. And what we see in this photograph are men digging the basement for a new winery. And it must have been really exciting because look at the little girls are dressed up in their fancy clothes, and all kind of men and boys are watching as these Fresno scrapers then are digging the basement to the new Ferrario winery, which was a huge building for the day, much bigger than the Roboli building just down the street. I think this picture was taken around 1920. You see the horses are still pulling wagons, but there's also some Model T looking trucks. Notice this street, the big ruts in it. And so it certainly was still a dirt and perhaps gravel street. The buildings down at the end are still there. And guess what? They're stuccoed over. And then the wall, the west wall of the winery is still there. And you can see that when you go to the parking lot. It's the west wall of the parking lot. Okay, now Ferrario then moved out of town, and he decided to move way, way out of town. And so he built this building in 1936, which now then is part of the Lutheran Church, which is kind of kitty corner across the street from the library. Okay, then now we're going to walk down 2nd Street down to the corner of L, and I want you to check out the concrete right in front of the doorway, and you'll see there's horseshoes and brand imprints. Now the horseshoes are fairly easy to see, and the ones up here, which are hard to see, are kind of regular size horseshoes. These are huge, huge horseshoes. And we'll show you later some horses that maybe had shoes that size. Over here, which is really hard to see, it's very faded out, even when you're standing right there. But they're brands. There's all kind of brands in from local ranchers that were pressed in the concrete when it was still wet. Okay, across the street then, again at the corner of 2nd and L Street, is this very, very large mural. And on the right side, right here, is the Robert Livermore's, what is a lot of people call the Around the Horn house, a pre-assembled house that was shipped from the East Coast to here. Over here is Dr. Gordon's house, which turns out was never here at all when the vineyards were in this area, because it was on 4th Street, and we'll show you that. Let's see, do we do that? No, we don't do that in this talk. So you'll have to come and see our South Side talk sometime. We talk about the Gordon house. Okay, now we're going to walk down L Street down to 1st Street. And right now we're looking at the southwest corner of 1st and L. And one of the pluses of being the Livermore historian is I get to meet a lot of really interesting people. And one of the people that I met turned out was the great granddaughter of the man who built this hotel. And she came up from Fresno then, and we had a nice talk. Now, when you're downtown, look right in the corner. Let's see, I'll show you that in the next picture. But first, let's say this building was built 1874 as the Morningstar Hotel, and it was that for some time. Then it was renamed the Commercial Hotel. And then for a long, long time, it was called the Valley Hotel. It's said to be the first building in Livermore that had concrete sidewalks, and the first building that had a bathroom with hot and cold running water. Okay, now let's look at what's there now. And if you look at the door, the front door, you'll see it faces both streets, just as the Valley Hotel did. And you look at the overhang, and you look around the windows, and you see the builder then made this to look very, very much like the original Valley Hotel, the Morningstar Hotel. And I think they did a really, really nice job. Okay, the next building you're going to recognize for sure, and that's the Donut Wheel. And that was built in 1941, and then Purity Market was in there. The Donut Wheel went in there in the 1960s. And this style of architecture, you may find kind of humorous. This style of architecture is called Google. Okay, now the question for you is, what was there? And the answer, in the old days, what was there was another hotel. And that was the Washington Hotel, which became the Palace Hotel, and then finally Mally's Hotel. And so running on the left side of your screen then is 1st Street, and then L Street is running off on the right side of your screen. So that was a really big hotel. Okay, guess what? We're going to go walking down L Street now towards where the train depot used to be. And now, of course, all that's there is a parking lot waiting for further construction. But it's been a parking lot for a bit and will stay a parking lot. Okay, well, what was there before? A lot of you will remember, I think most of you will remember, that KFC was in this site. And before that, it was another hotel. From 1872 to 1962, it was the Farmers Exchange Hotel. And then it became the Travelers Hotel. And then finally, in later years, it was the Lutz Hotel. And then it was the Greyhound bus station from 1923 all the way up to 1962 when it was demolished. Some of you that have been in Livermore for a long time will remember when it was the Lux Hotel and the Greyhound bus station. And you see some people are checking a map. I don't know if they just came to town or they're leaving or what, but you can see the bus would pull in here and then we go around the back and then pull out onto 1st Street. Okay, now we're going to go down a little bit farther north on L Street, And this is the old train depot. And of course, it's not there anymore. And what I'm showing you in this photo then is where it is now at the transit center at the east end of Railroad Avenue. And you can see they've done a really nice job. It's open to the public. They use it now as they used to. That is to sell tickets for the train. And so it's been put back in good use. Okay, the next picture shows the midnight ride of the train depot. And this was in the summer of 2017. And that was really interesting how they cut the train depot in half and they moved it. They only had to take down one stop sign right next to Blacksmith Square. And then they had to take down this light pole here. First, they took down the arm, but they still couldn't clear it. So they had to take the whole pole down. But the drivers, the house movers, did a tremendous job. They were able to weave in and out of stop signs. And so this was the only big job they had to take down at all. Now, the next picture then shows what the building looked like. We're not sure. This was before the earthquake in 1906 because it shows the chimney as brick. So that building was there in use from 1892 to 1973. It wasn't the first train depot. The first one was a very small building, and that was built in 1869 when Mendenhall donated land to the railroad and helped establish then the town of Livermore. Okay, right next to the train depot on the east side, there were at least 3 or 4 Chinese wash houses. Now let's go to the other end of the street. So now we're out on Livermore Avenue, and this is the entrance then to the new Stockman's Park. And I don't know how many of you have been there, but there's a really interesting statue in the park, and there's some other memorial plaques. But this statue, I think, is kind of interesting. It shows a cowboy then taking off his hat and replacing it with an army helmet. And this was during World War I, when a number of young men from Livermore then joined the army. Okay, now let's get back onto First Street, and we're heading east on First Street. And a lot of you will recognize this building that's been restored and looks really, really nice to me. And that's the Marx Rosenthal building. It first was a general store, and then a dry goods store, a grocery store, a variety store, a tailor shop, a dry cleaners. And then it turned out in 1928, it was the first Safeway store in town. And then in later years, of course, it has been a number of restaurants. And right now you can see it's called Plucked. Okay, this shows the building then, I think either it must have been about the tail end or just after the end of World War I. But you can see the building then. Now, over the years, all that front part was removed, and it didn't look like that at all. It doesn't look like it does now. Yeah, it's much different. So anyway, it's been rebuilt to look back like it did before, and I think that's really great. Now look at all the men. They all wore hats in those days. And look at the cars all lined up. It'd be fun to have some of those cars. Okay, look at this building right here. I want you to look at that building because we're going to talk about that next. And some of you will remember that is the Double Barrel. It's just open now as a taco tequila restaurant. That building was built in 1884. It was first used as a saloon. There were so many saloons in Livermore in the old days. I think, there's 3 churches, I think, in the early days. And I don't know how many saloons. There must have been 3 or 4 times that. Okay, so this was first a saloon, then a grocery store, an undertaker's, an auto painting shop, a furniture store, stationery store, and has housed a number of restaurants. And I think this was the first home of First Street Ale House before they moved next door. Now, what's of note to this is Susan Ivy Graham had her undertaking business in there. And Susan Ivy Graham was the first female licensed undertaker in the entire state of California. Now, across the street is the Union. And people say, well, that building doesn't look terribly exciting. Well, it turns out that building was built in 1871 for Charles Whitmore, who was a merchant, and he had a general store in there. And over the years, it's been a saloon many times. And some of the names I think you might find interesting. It was the Magnolia Saloon, the Cuckoo, the Central Saloon, and then my favorite, it was called the Fat Boy Bar for some time. And it certainly then is the oldest commercial building in Livermore. And again, it was a wooden building, but all of the old time gingerbread type decorations are gone. And it was stuccoed again many years ago. Okay, now we're going to walk about a half a block down, and we're going to stop in front of the yogurt shop, which I think most of you know exactly where that is. And this is where then we talk to the people that are on our walks. We talk about, in the old days, there was a lack of refrigeration for vegetables, for meat, for milk. But what was important to many of the men, there was a lack of refrigeration for beer, and they had to have fresh beer. And so there were at least a couple of breweries, and maybe 3, maybe even more breweries in Livermore. And so one of the things I always ask then, where do you think the closest brewery was? And people will look all over the place, and they can't figure out where it was until finally, sometimes, but not always, sometimes somebody will look on the ground, and right in front of the door, it says brewery. Well, this is where Dennis Burnell had his brewery. He bought it from another fellow in 1901. And then in 1908, it burned down. Now, Burnell was an interesting guy, and we'll not talk much about him today, but he owned all kind of businesses in Livermore. Very, very successful man. A great house, which we see when we do the South Side walks. So Burnell claimed that his beer was the best and the purest in the entire United States. So we keep walking down the street then, and now we're right by the Chamber of Commerce building. And I asked the people on the walk, where were the bricks from the old brewery used? Because Dennis Burnell was a very, very good businessman. He didn't want to waste anything. And so he wanted the bricks from the burned down brewery used again to build a new building. So people, they say, oh, this building, that building. And most of them come to the consensus that it's the Vans health food building across the street. That must be it. Well, it turns out it's not that. It's not that at all. It's a building that some of you might guess, but others might not. It wasn't Vans Health because that building wasn't built until 1917. And you see, kind of a sad note that that building now is closed, that they've gone out of business. Okay, so where were the bricks used? And it turns out they were used to build what's now called the Dennis Burnell Building, and built in 1874 The original brewery was built in 1874, but it was destroyed then by the fire in 1908. So now you can see that building on 2nd Street then. And you notice it's not equal on both sides. If you look to the right side, you see it's a little bit wider than it is on the left side. And I was told, and I can't remember by who, and I couldn't say it's 100% accurate, but I was told they ran out of bricks, and that's why the left side isn't quite as wide as the right side. Makes an interesting story anyway. Okay, let's keep walking down 1st Street. Now we're going to look across the street, and we're going to look at a building that was built 1878 for the big sum of $500. And this building then was the home of the Livermore Library, it turns out, from 1878 to 1911. And that it's the building with the a sloped roof. This was the library building. This part over here then was built sometime later. Okay, let's see who was in that building before. And it turns out the Arrow Bakery was there. And sometimes the man's name actually was Darrow, and somehow it got shortened to the Arrow Bakery. And he also had candy and ice cream and so on. And the man in the truck, we found out, according to some notations on an old photograph, is Joe Karate, who is the man who built Joesville out on Portola Avenue. Okay, the next building, we're going to go down the street a little bit farther, is the Oddfellows Hall, which initially was built in 1873, and then an addition was made in 1874. And you can see then that it was covered with stucco also. And this building was used for a harness shop, a furniture store, jewelries. Post office was in there for a while. And this is said to be the 2nd oldest building in Livermore. Now, I want you to look right on the sidewalk, and there are the initials in for the International Order of Oddfellows. And as you walk around Livermore, there's more than just a couple brass letters on the sidewalk. And there's some others. I think there's some in tile you might find. So walk around and look down every now and then and see what you can find. Okay, what was in that building? Well, one of the things that was in that building was Garner's store. And I want you to look at the ceiling. Look at all the chairs that are hanging from the ceiling. And we have pictures of other stores in the old days too. And they didn't waste any space at all. They just really crowded things in. I think nowadays the fire marshals would be really, really upset. But look at, there's baby buggies up on the shelves. There's harnesses in the back. Looks like rugs or carpets in the front here. New sewing machines out in the front. So a lot of these stores, they sold all kinds of stuff. Okay, down the street is another building that's pretty old. And that's this building, which was built in 1915. And that replaced a really large building, which was the Fashion livery stables, where a lot of the horses in town then were kept. Okay, now let's cross back over the street. And we're standing now in front of Strizzy's restaurant at J and 1st Street. And look at the mural on the side. We'll see that closer up in just a bit. But let's look at what was in that building before. Well, not in that building. This building replaced a building that, a wooden building that was there earlier. And this was the Lawless Drugstore. And then Bacone and Mess. And then finally Bazel's drugstore was there. And a lot of the people remember Bazel's That's a name. I think they had the drugstore across the street for a while. Okay, the next picture shows the mural then that's on the side of Strizzi's now. And when I was docent one day at the Heritage Guild, a lady walked in, and I think she is the lady in red, I think right here, if I remember right. Anyway, she is the one that let's see, did she design it or did the tile work? One or the other, I guess. Anyway, the three ladies then are talking about what should be in the mural and all that. So that's kind of fun. But that's a great mural. It shows all kinds of really interesting places here in Livermore. But we're running out of time. We got to start walking faster. Let's go down the street a little bit farther, and we're going to stop in front of the Shinoni Building, which was built in 1914. Now, the Shinoni Building housed a number of theaters. Well, it housed one theater that changed its name several times over the years. It started life as the Bell Theater and then became the California. And some of you may remember it was the State Theater before the Vine Theater was opened up much farther down First Street. And then upstairs was Croce's restaurant. Okay, the next picture shows the, I might say right in the front middle here, that was the entrance then to the theater. Okay, the next picture shows probably not too much after it was built, when it was the Bell Theater. And you can see the sign, it's kind of hard to read, but it advertises in Croce's restaurant, which was again upstairs. Okay, now we're going to cross the street, and we're looking at the Bank of Italy, built in 1921, and started out again as the Bank of Italy, was a city hall for some time, and for many years now has been the home of the independent newspaper, and a great, great building here in downtown Livermore. I want you to look at this building right behind the Bank of Italy building. We're going to talk about that in just a tiny bit. But one of my favorite buildings that was torn down to build the Bank of Italy was this building, and that's the Mcleod Building. It was built in 1883 and was torn down then in 1921 so that the Bank of Italy building could be built there. Down the street on the left, right in this area here, is where Blacksmith Square is today. Okay, let's keep moving. And let's go back to that building I talked about, which was right behind the Bank of Italy. Right now it's called the Stockman's Club. And what did it look like in the old days? Some of you might be surprised. It was the Bank of Italy. It was the temporary office for the Bank of Italy while the new building was being built. And I understand that the vault is still in the back of the building. I haven't been in there to check that out, but that's something I probably ought to do. In fact, wasn't there a restaurant or something they called was it called the Vault? Some name like that. We'll have to figure that one out. Okay, let's keep moving. Back across the street now to the other corner, and we're looking at the Masonic Hall building, which was built in 1909. The Masons, you may know, were the first fraternal organization in Livermore. They were organized all the way back in 1871. Okay, now look at the building the way it is now. Look at that really good. Okay, let's look at it, what it looked like in the very early days. Now, I don't have a date for this photograph, but I think it must have been 1910 to 1915, sometime in that area. You see Dr. Thurkoff, the dentist, was up above there, First National Bank of Livermore. And notice the door then to the bank was facing both streets, much like the Valley Hotel. And now, of course, it's a little bit, it's about where the old white car is, where the door is now. Okay. Okay, now right on the corner, let's see if I can point it out, almost right about in here, there's some brass letters that I want you to look at. And it says MS Antono. I don't know how to pronounce that, but something like that anyway. And it took me the longest time to figure out who that was. I couldn't find anybody with that last name anywhere in Alameda County. In fact, I couldn't find anybody with that last name anywhere in California. Well, I eventually figured out it had to be Mary Sophia Newell, who was the wife of Fred Anthony. Now, Fred then had a hardware store there, and also he had a big tinsmith shop. And the tinsmith shop then was on that corner and was eventually torn down, and that's where the Masonic Building is now. Okay, and I think Fred had a lot of health problems, because in later years then Mary ran the store, and that may be when these brass letters were put in the concrete. And for whatever reason, I guess some work was done or whatever, but the last couple letters then of the name disappeared during some kind of construction work. So that's kind of unfortunate. Fred was kind of an interesting guy. His uncle George was the governor of Kansas at one time, and his brother Charles was the first full-time minister of the Presbyterian Church here in Livermore. Okay, right next to us then is the flagpole. Now, the original flagpole was put up in 1905. It was 126 feet tall and weighed 5,300 pounds. It came from Oregon then by ship. Now, there's two stories. One is it came to Oakland and they brought it from Oakland then. The other story is, no, actually it might have landed in Oakland, but then it went by ship up to Martinez, and it came from Martinez to Livermore because they didn't have any big hills then they had to go over. So I'm not sure, both those are in the newspapers, old newspapers, so I'm not sure which one is right. Anyway, regardless, in 2004, the new flagpole was put up, and it's 120 foot, so 6 foot shorter than the old pole. And it's moved 30 feet to the south then from where the original pole was. And we'll see why that was in just a bit. Okay, across the street, directly east then of the flagpole is a park that's going by two different names, and that's, to me, causes some confusion. The old time name is Mills Square Park, and that's because there are a number of grinding mills for flour in this area. And the new name, many of you know, is Livermore Plaza, because of the new element that was discovered then out at Lawrence Livermore Labs. This will be completely leveled, I understand, and the soil has to be removed because there was a gas station there years ago, and apparently there was some seepage, and so this will all be removed, and a new park will be put in there. Okay, right where the park is now was the old hotel, the old Livermore Hotel, and this shows the flag dedication in September 9th of 1905, and you see the big crowd of people then, and you see where the flagpole is. Now, some of you that go to St. Michael's Church will be interested to know the church on the left then is the old St. Michael's Church before it burned down. A good part of that side of the street burned down in a huge fire years ago. Okay, the next one, we're going across, let's see, diagonally across the street, and we're over at Lizzie Fountain Park. And this was named after a very, very interesting lady who lived down where the AT&T building is, right across the street from the post office. Lizzie, she was interesting. Okay. Yeah, so that's a nice park. And there's a lot of plaques in there in memory of different people. So when you have time, we'll walk around in there and look at some of the plaques. The 2 redwood trees are in memory of some young men that lost their lives. Okay, the next building, or the next picture then, shows what was at the park before it was torn down. And so the Hub Restaurant, which is in dead center in the photograph, and then on the end is the Hub Bar, were there. Now, the flagpole you can't see, but you see how First Street, we're moving along First Street, and then to continue on First Street, you had to make a really sharp left, and then a sharp right, and then First Street kept going. And that caused all kinds of trouble. There were wrecks and whatever else there. And every now and then somebody would run into the flagpole. And the next picture is going to show, I might say the Hub, when I came to Livermore in 1959, the Hub was one of the very few restaurants that we could eat at. Another one was at the old bus station. I remember a fellow named Joe Dan ran that. But there were very few places to eat in 1959. Okay, let's look at the Hub in the very early days. And so here's the Hub. And then you can see where the flagpole is, right in the middle of the street. And that was probably not a problem at all when people had horses and weren't going that fast and all that. But when people started driving cars, there were a number of wrecks where people ran right into the flagpole. My grandpa tells about when my grandmother learned to drive, and it was not a pretty picture. Okay, down the street, right here then is the Oddfellows Hall. And then down here then is the Marx Building. And so some of these old buildings are still here, but most of them are gone. Okay, so what does Livermore look like now? And you recognize this then. It's big changes from the old days. And people ask then, how come in the old days, with very, very little traffic, they made the streets so wide? And what I've been told, the streets are so wide so that wagons could turn around. It's very difficult to back up a wagon then that's been pulled by horses or mules. Very difficult. Where here, the streets were so wide, very easy to turn a stagecoach around. Oh, speaking of stagecoaches, we have one here on the bottom left. And you know, the stagecoaches took people up to the Mendenhall Springs. And apparently this was a mode of transportation before the train came in 1869. But even after that, it looks like they were used. Okay, now we're going to go down J Street and look at the Foresters Hall, which was built in 1914. I believe this was a stucco building right from the start. I don't think it was covered over like many of the buildings. So here's the Foresters Hall, 1914. And this is what it looked like. Again, we don't have a date on a lot of these old photographs, but this is when Beck Groceries had a good part of the downstairs. Now the Becks must have done a pretty good business, because look at all the wagons and, excuse me, even the old cars. Okay, now we're going to go way down First Street, down to the City Hall, the old City Hall. which was built in 1882 for a fellow named Hawley. And it was first used as a bank and then later became the City Hall. Okay, in 1936 then, it was covered with brick and a lot of modifications then. So look at the way it is now. And this is the way it was when it was built. And you see it was, again, another brick building that, a very nice brick building, but doesn't begin to look like it does now. Okay. Oh, excuse me, just a second. Okay, one of the things Livermore was known for were raising draft horses. And they had a show every year in Livermore. They had a big show. And these draft horses then were sold to companies that use them to pull wagons, mainly in Oakland and San Francisco. And so that was a big, big deal here in town. Now, the photograph I saw said that the man standing here was Dennis Burnell. So again, he was involved in just about everything you can think about here in town. Okay, moving on to the site. So here's the old City Hall, and next to it then was the Firehouse. So, and that was added on later, of course. So the Firehouse, but what I always like to show people is the mural that's on the side of the Firehouse. I think it's really neat. And it gives a history then of firefighting here in Livermore. And it shows the 3 fire engines that have been restored and are on display out at the Duarte Garage, and often then are shown in parades and sometimes other places here in town. The woman that painted this mural is also the one that painted the Historymobile for the Heritage Guild. Just a nice looking building. Okay, now let's get back. Going in front of the police station, the City Hall. We're going to turn now, go down Mcleod Street, and we're going to stop right in front then of the what was called the new city jail. And it replaced the old wooden jail. It replaced it in 1923. Now, the woman that owns the store in there, the interior decorating store, super nice. Get a chance to go in there when you have time. That a lot of the old fixtures from the jail are still there. And especially when we have kids on our 3rd grade walks, she shows them then the key she has to that steel door, that big iron door, is the original key. So it's kind of neat that that history has not been lost. Okay, down the corner then is the Anderson Berry house, and Mr. Berry is a very interesting guy. The whole Berry family is very interesting. Goes way back. The lady and her husband who own this. The lady is the one who runs the interior decorating store out of the old jail. Okay, now we're going to have to walk really fast. We're going to go past the post office, and we're going to go all the way down to 2nd and J Street and look at this building, which is now a coffee shop. And it's been a number of businesses over the years. But this building replaced then the old McVickers Hall, which burned down in 1919. But in 1913 then, the Bell Theater, which was housed in this building, the Bell Theater moved over to the Shononee Building, which we saw earlier. Look at the sign. I don't know if you can see it very well, but the sign out in front says that movies in 1909. This photograph was marked 1909. That movies were 5 cents for children and 10 cents for adults. Okay, and McVickers Hall was used for silent movie showing, roller skating, theater plays, and so on. And then the Bell Theater for a number of years. Okay, let's head back to the Carnegie Park. And one of the last things we're going to look at then is in the distance is the old flagpole. This is what's left of the original flagpole. 3 20-foot sections were salvaged. You know, there's some big cracks in the flagpole and a lot of damage over the years. But 3 good sections were saved. And the original equipment up on top, the hardware, I understand is from the original flagpole. And so that's pretty neat. So it's 60 feet now. So about half of, a little bit less than half of what it originally was. When you go inside, whenever we get to open up the Carnegie Building again, go inside and you can see there's a section of the old flagpole. Look at the crack. It goes almost all the way through. And wow, it's really scary. If there'd been a big wind and you know, the flag would act like a sail, wow, if that had come down, it'd caused major damage. But thank goodness it was detected to be in such terrible shape and was taken down and replaced. Okay, let's stop now right in front of the Carnegie Building. And the last thing I want to tell you is that these bricks then from the building were made by the Livermore Brickworks. And so that kind of wraps it up. Now, I have a request for you. If you have any old photographs of homes or churches, please let me know. And then I'm really interested in finding out more about the Sears and other kid houses that may have been built here in Livermore. If you know anything about those, please let me know. And if you know about some old houses that we've missed on some of our South Side walks, please let me know. We're always interested in researching more of the houses. And there's a number of us at the Heritage Guild who like to do that. And then the last thing I would say to you, think about joining the Livermore Heritage Guild, lhg.org, if you're at all interested in Livermore history. And with that, I think I'm going to turn this back over to Blanche. And are you there, Blanche?
Hi, I am. Thank you so much, Richard. You did a fantastic job. Now we'll all be looking around and looking down when we're walking around downtown Livermore. And you've had a few questions come through. So I'm just going to read you the first one. Somebody asked, what year did the Yin Yin open?
I'm not sure. I don't know. It's been here as far back as I can remember. Like I said, I came in 1959. Whether it was Yin Yin then or not, I really don't remember. But I know it's been that way for a long time.
All right, let me see. You had another question. When did Malleys come?
Well, Malley was an old German family, if I remember right, and they were here very early. And I remember, and I don't know exactly where it was, but I remember Malley's being on the south side of the street in an old wood building. And shortly after I came to Livermore, I think that was torn down. And then Malley's moved directly across the street and was there for a long time. And what was his last name? Peter Lim? Was that Lim? Yeah, Peter Lim ran that as a restaurant for a long time. So that was called Malley's. But the original Malley's and restaurant that I knew about was kind of right across the street, I think. But they also then, in the later years of the Washington Hotel, they called out the Malley's Hotel. But yeah, Malley's goes way back. It's a very old family here in the Valley.
Let's see, you have another question. Is there a new jail in Livermore?
Yes. And luckily I've never been in it. No, I don't know, but I assume there must be jail facilities in the new police building. I'm sure there must be. And then I know that, you know, that often then people that are in deep trouble end up over at Santa Rita for a while. So if anybody from the police department is online tonight with us, maybe they can help us with that.
Yeah, we got another question about the Firestone, where the building where the Firestone is at. And Charles wanted to know if, wasn't that an old grocery store?
Where the Firestone store is?
Yes,
Next to the Valley Hotel?
I think so.
Wow, I don't know. I only remembered as a tire sales company.
And
I
there's,
don't know. I'll have to check on that. I don't know. I never heard of it being a grocery store.
and here, and I think this is probably the most important question of the night. They want to, so one of our nice guests wants to know if you can make these talks more frequent.
Oh, thank you. If I don't get too hoarse.
There's another
You
question.
know, there's a lot of houses still on the south side of the railroad tracks that we haven't talked about. Some really nice houses over around Mcleod Street in that area there. And then there's some like the Nissen House and Murray's house. But a lot of people, I think, would be very interested on the north side of the railroad tracks. There's some really great old houses. Some, unfortunately, are in pretty sad shape, I think, right now. But some are in really, really good shape. And I think we should give a talk about that sometime.
Yes. Well, we've got you booked, Richard.
Oh, thank you.
Anytime, we're ready.
John's asking if you can give any detail about the nuclear shelter in the post office.
No, you know, we got a a query. You know, one of the neat things of being the city historian, I get a lot of queries, sometimes from the library, sometimes the Heritage Guild, sometimes from the city. And one of the queries, and I can't remember who it came from, and we haven't finalized our thoughts on this, but there was a query that somebody said they heard for sure there's a trap door in Livermore High School in one of the classrooms that goes down to a tunnel that goes all the way to the post office. And as far as I can tell, there's not a whole lot, you know, that's one of those conspiracy theories, I think, that there doesn't seem to be much truth to that. There is, from what I understand, I've never seen it, but there is definitely a shelter in the basement. Now, I don't know when that was built, and I don't know. I assume it was during the Cold War, but I don't know that for sure. We do know that on Railroad Avenue, Dr. Shirley had a shelter, and there were plans that I've seen for a shelter for over 20,000 people during the Cold War. That it never got built, but there were plans. And then I understand there's 3 or 4 other private shelters that were built. But I'll have to find out more about the one in the post office. That's on my list of things to check.
Let's see, there is someone here, and I'll forward your email where they have Rebecca Ferris. There are 2 houses next door to her that are Sears kit houses. West.
Oh wow!
West
Yeah,
on
please
North
send me
Wall Street
her
and on
email.
Park Street. I'm sending her your email, Richard, so that she can contact
Oh,
you.
super. Very good. That's wonderful. That's great.
Richard, somebody asks if the Robert Livermore Jr. house was rebuilt on the old foundation.
Not that I know of. I can't address that. I don't know. Now, the around the Horn house is long gone.
And let's see. Someone, let's see, Jessica asks, is there any history about the casino in Livermore?
The one out on the freeway or the one at the old Cactus Jacks?
I'm not sure which one she was asking about. Doesn't say.
Well, I can't answer for either one, I'm sorry to say.
All right. And then Cindy asks about, she owns a house on North K Street built in 1928. Where could she find pictures of it from way back when?
Okay, we have at the Heritage Guild, there are some pictures of old houses. Not that many, unfortunately, and that's why people that have pictures of old houses, I wish they'd let us know, and then we'll get those scanned. We can get the originals back to the people, but we can scan them then and put them in the archives at the Heritage Guild. We may or may not have information on that. She'll have to send me the address, and I'll see what I can find.
She could send that to your email address if she
Yeah,
wants.
that'd be fine.
Okay, thanks.
We have a question also about a list of houses with bomb shelters in Livermore. Do you know of any? This person's anonymous, but they say they know of at least one house.
Okay, I don't know. I've heard of a couple of them. I have not seen a list at all, and offhand, I don't think the city has a list. Yeah, that'd be an interesting thing to find out what happened to them. Let's see, one, I forget where that one was. I remember there was one in town somebody told me about, and eventually they filled it in then. They filled it in with dirt.
I'll have them send you the address, Richard.
Okay.
And somebody asked about the Victorian house at Concannon that used to be downtown. Can you tell us more about that house?
Well, that's, excuse me. Yeah, that's a house we do talk about when we do the South Side walks. That house was at the corner then of K and 4th Street, where there's a dentist office now. So it's right across the street from Carnegie Park, right across the street from the Presbyterian, the old church, which they call the chapel now. Okay, that was moved out to the corner then, right on the corner of South Livermore and Tesla Road. And then the family that paid for it and moved it did a lot of work on it, spent a lot of money, I understand, and weren't able to finish it. And then I think the parents, and I may have this wrong, but I think both parents passed away and the children didn't really want to keep going the tremendous effort needed to fix up the house. So then the story is that Virginia and John Madden bought it, perhaps with the thought of turning it into a bed and breakfast. But if I remember the story right, there were a lot of problems with sewer hookups and septic tanks and so on. So anyway, that didn't happen. And so then when the wine group bought Concannon, they moved the house from the corner then, where it was suffering some vandalism troubles. They moved it to where it is now, and then have restored it at least on the outside. I'm not sure. I hear different stories about the inside, so I don't know what the inside looks like. But a fellow named Gordon, then Dr. Gordon, built that house then. And we have actually pictures of it then when it was on 4th Street. And the color of it is, it looked like it was dark on one section and light on the other. The way it's painted now, I think is quite attractive, but it's not painted like it originally was. But yeah, it was quite a big house. I think Dr. Gordon only lived in Livermore, can't remember, I think about 4 years, something like that, until he moved. One of the interesting things that we point out that we found out, a lot of these doctors' houses, including Dr. Gordon's then, when you look at the Dr. Gordon house out at Concannon's, look, there's a big front door. And we were told the big front doors in all the doctor houses were used where the family and their friends, visitors, and so on would go in. There's a smaller door on the Dr. Gordon house is off to the left. There's a smaller door, and then that was used then for patients. It turns out most of the doctors in the old days had offices in their homes.
Let's see. Thanks, Richard. You have another question about a house, 7th and Mcleod, a Jensen house. The person's, it's Thomas. He's asking, what can you tell me about this house? I need to go on your South Side tour, he writes.
Okay, 7th and Mcleod?
Yes, a Jensen house.
Boy, it doesn't ring a bell. I'd have to look that up. Yeah, have them send me an email if you would, and we'll see what we can find out.
Okay, thanks. There were some people weighing in about bomb shelter locations. If you're looking at the chat, everybody, they said there's a few in the college streets south of East Avenue with fallout shelters, a house on Chateau Place with a bomb shelter.
Blanche, can you collect all that and get it to me sometime?
Sure,
is that,
yes.
Can you save those?
Yes. People are giving us all kinds of good information.
That's what we're after. Thank you all.
Someone was asking about the old Kmart building. What was that originally? What was the old Kmart building?
Now remind me where Kmart was.
That I don't know.
Boy, I don't remember where Kmart was.
Maybe someone in the chat will know. Oh, where Trader Joe's is?
Oh, okay. No, I don't know anything about that.
And Bill said it was the old brick factory.
Oh, I think, okay, the Livermore Brickyard, I think was down a little bit farther. You know, we call that the Brickyard, and there's a plaque right in front of, let's see, who is it? I think it's Cotteroli's, not Cotteroli, the jewelry store, across from Valley Memorial.
Oh, Cavalli or?
Oh, shoot. Yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, there's a jewelry store there. Yeah, it's called the Brickyard anyway. I think that's where the big brick factory was. Then, of course, in Pleasanton, there was a huge factory. What was that? Remillard, I think it was.
Okay, and just I'll just respond to the person who wanted to know that you can view the Southside one that was done in December on the library's YouTube channel, and also the Livermore Heritage Guild has a YouTube channel. And this one will be recorded and it will be on there also if you want to go back and listen, or if you have any friends or relatives who would like to get a chance to come tonight. You can certainly view it that way. And there'll be a link on the Livermore Heritage Guild's website.
Well, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. And like I said, I always learn something, and I appreciate all the input.
Thank you, Richard. We really appreciate the talk. It was great.
We certainly all learned so much from you. Thanks again for another great talk.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.